Okay, so obviously during this era, there is just like an event that completely changes the course of world history, and we can call that the discovery, or I don't know, like exploration. No, it's just conquest. But this comes from technological innovations from the East finally making their way to Europe, plus innovations in ship design, especially out of Portugal and the Dutch. States actively sponsor exploration because they want to try to find routes to Asia that don't involve them having to go through the Italian city-states or the Muslim gunpowder empires. Prince Henry of Portugal founds a navigation school, the Spanish sponsor Columbus and then other conquistadors. The English, French, and Dutch are a little bit behind the Spanish and Portuguese, but they do start sending explorers over to North America to try to find a Northwest Passage. Spoiler, they're not going to find one. And all of this leads to the euphemistically named the Columbian Exchange. The Old World brought diseases, measles, smallpox, malaria. They also brought horse, pigs, cattle. From Africa, they brought okra and rice, and sugar, which gets turned into cash crop agriculture, which is fueled by enslaved labor. For their part, the New World provides a ton of important staple crops that are going to sustain increasing populations. Next up, how did Europe maintain control of these growing empires? So how are these new maritime empires going to administer and get money from their colonies? Well, first, they do what everyone's done. They divide and conquer. Spain divides up New Spain into viceroyalties. The British establish charter colonies in places like in Asia where European powers don't have quite the strength to fully conquer those places yet. They're going to fund charter companies like the East India companies to kind of rule on their behalf. Really, the only thing that matters is that all of that money and that flow of silver and other goods goes through the mother country, and this is what's known as mercantilism. This helps create the first truly global economy, and we can see this with the flow of silver around the world. For example, it gets mined in the New Spain, in Mexico, and in Potosi in modern day Bolivia, and then it goes through the mother countries, whether that's back to Europe and then over to Asia, or over to other Spanish colonies like Manila in the Philippines, and then eventually on to China and India, where that silver then fuels the rise of increasing artisan production of goods like silk in China or cotton in India. But how are they able to do all this? Well, it's free labor. That's what's next. Last video, we talked about the rise of European mercantilist empires, but really the reason why they're able to grow so quickly is because they have free labor. First, European countries use indentured servitude, whether that is white people coming over from Europe or more commonly indigenous labor. In fact, the Spanish just continue using the Incan mita systems, but it turns especially cruel and coercive during this time period. Over time, the Spanish developed more sophisticated systems like the encomienda, which is essentially feudalism, right, where the indigenous people are like the serfs tied to the land. After a priest, Bartolomé de las Casas, protests, they turned that into the hacienda, which is basically the same thing, except that the indigenous people can technically leave. Thanks. But obviously the biggest change that's happening now is the rise of chattel slavery, and that means the enslaved people are no longer seen as people, they're seen as property that can be bought and sold. And in Virginia, for the first time in world history, the children of enslaved people are also enslaved. That's new. What else is new is that it's racially based slavery. In fact, race did not exist until the 1500s, when Europeans start calling themselves white people to justify enslaving non-white people. If you want more detail on that, I did a whole. So obviously, as these European empires began to grow around the world, they faced resistance and also just restrictions, especially in Asia. The Tokugawa shogunate just closed off their borders completely, except for the Dutch, who they let trade in and out of just one city where they could be easily monitored. The Ming dynasty just was like, we don't need any of this. They straight up just like burned their treasure fleet and was like, everyone will come to us and we'll just regulate it that way. But they also faced fierce local resistance from the places they were trying to conquer. Indigenous armed struggle like the Pueblo Revolt or Metacom's War, enslaved people fighting back in the American South, that's rebellions and running away. In the Caribbean, you see maroon communities, especially like that one led by Queen Nanny. In modern day Angola, you have Enna Nzinga, who is fighting against Portuguese control. The Cossacks under Pugachev rebel against Catherine the Great's expansionist tendencies. And the Marathas successfully rebel against the Mughal Empire and create their own independent kingdom that's going to last all the way up until the British Raj. So European states have entered the global power structure, and now, of course, they're thinking, how can we make this bigger?